The wind was a blade against Alara's skin, honed sharp on the teeth of the mountains. It scoured the last of the warmth from her bones, leaving a hollow ache that resonated with the emptiness in her belly. Snow, fine and merciless as sand, drove into her eyes, blurring the line between the bruised twilight sky and the unforgiving earth. Before her, stark against the encroaching dark, stood the ranch. It was less a home and more a scar on the landscape, a collection of dark timbers hunched beneath the weight of a reputation as grim as the winter. This was Silas's place, a place haunted not by spirits, but by memory and the scorn of the righteous. The town had spat her out for the sin of being widowed and penniless, and the wilderness had offered no kinder welcome. Now this was the last door in the world. To turn back was to lie down and let the snow have her. To knock was to face the man they called the beast, the recluse whose own tragedy had turned him into a pariah. Fear was a cold stone in her throat, but desperation was a fire at her back. She stumbled forward, her worn boots sinking into the drifts, each step a final, ragged prayer. The air was thick with the scent of pine and frost and a profound, unnerving stillness. This was a place where things ended. She could feel it, her own end, perhaps, lifting a hand that trembled not just from cold but from a deep, primal terror. She knocked on the heavy oak door, the sound swallowed by the howling wind. He did not open it so much as allow it to swing inward on a long, groaning complaint. Silas was taller than the stories suggested, broader in the shoulder, his presence filling the doorway and casting a shadow that seemed to drink the last of the light. His face was a map of hard country, carved by sun and sorrow, his eyes holding the flat, distant look of a man who had seen too much and spoken too little. He said nothing. He simply watched her, a woman half frozen on his threshold, her dignity stripped away by poverty and the judgment of others. Alara could not find her voice. The words she had rehearsed, a plea for shelter, an offer of work, died in her throat, useless against the sheer, unassailable silence of him. He saw the truth in her chattering teeth and the desperate clench of her jaw. With a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of his head, he stepped back, a silent invitation into the warmth that bled from the interior. She hesitated for only a moment before shuffling past him, bringing the cold and the scent of the storm into his home. The room was sparse, functional, dominated by a great stone hearth where a fire crackled, a living, breathing heart in the chest of the silent house. He closed the door, shutting out the world, and the sound of the bolt sliding home felt terrifyingly final. He gestured toward the fire, his meaning clear. She moved toward the heat, her frozen limbs clumsy, her gaze fixed on the flames. He placed a tin cup of water on the rough-hewn table beside a thick slice of dark bread. He did not speak. He did not have to. His actions were a language of their own, stark and without ornament. Eat, drink, be warm. It was more kindness than she had known in months, and it was offered by the one man she had been taught to fear above all others. Days bled into a silent routine, measured by the rising and setting of a winter sun that offered little warmth. Alara existed in the spaces Silas did not occupy. When he was out tending to the few hardy beasts that survived in his care, she would mend his worn shirts, her stitches small and neat, a quiet testament to her worth. She swept the floors, banked the fire, and learned the geography of his silence. It was not an angry quiet, she discovered, but a heavy one, weighted with a loss that seemed to have settled into the very timbers of the house. She saw the ghost of it in the small, unused rocking chair by the hearth, in the way his gaze would sometimes drift to a faded mark on the wall where a child's height had once been measured. He was a man haunted by a life that was no longer there, and the town, in its cruelty, had mistaken his grief for monstrosity. He never spoke of it. He never spoke of anything beyond a necessary word. Woods low, storms coming, yet he communicated in other ways. He would leave a freshly skinned rabbit on the porch, a silent provision. He once found her thin cloak, torn by a snagged branch, and the next morning she found it lying on her cot, the tear stitched with thick, masculine thread, clumsy but strong. Trust was not given. It was earned in the stillness, in the observation of these small, vital gestures. She stopped flinching when he entered a room. He stopped watching her as if she were a skittish deer about to bolt. They were two solitary creatures sharing a den against the harshness of the world, their communion built on the bedrock of shared hardship. She was no longer just the desperate woman on his doorstep, and he was no longer the beast of local legend. He was Silas. She was Alara. It was enough. The thaw, when it came, brought more than just melting snow. It brought riders. 3 of them, their horses churning the soft mud of the yard. Alara saw them from the window, her heart seizing in her chest. It was Henderson, the self-righteous deacon who had led the charge to cast her out, and 2 of his brutish sons. They dismounted with an air of grim ownership, their faces hard with purpose. Silas emerged from the barn, moving to stand between them and the house, his posture a solid, unyielding wall. "She has no place here, Silas," Henderson called out, his voice ringing with false piety. "It ain't right. A decent woman don't shelter with a man like you." Silas remained silent, his stillness more potent than any threat. "We've come to take her back to town," Henderson continued, stepping forward. "She'll be cared for by the church cared for." Alara knew what that meant. A life of shame and servitude, a constant reminder of her fall from grace. She looked at Silas, standing alone against the 3 of them, and saw the fragile piece of their world about to be shattered. They would not just take her. They would use this as the excuse they always wanted to drive him from his land, to erase the uncomfortable memory of him and his tragedy. In that blinding moment of clarity, she saw the only weapon she had left. It was a terrible, ruinous thing, but it was hers. She walked out of the house, her steps steady, her head held high, and stopped beside Silas. She did not look at him. She looked directly at Henderson, her eyes burning with a cold fire he had never seen before. She let the silence stretch, letting them see her, standing beside the beast, unafraid. Then, in a voice that did not tremble, a voice loud enough for them all to hear but pitched with a devastating, feigned intimacy for the man beside her, she spoke the words that would save and condemn them both. "You're going to have sex with me?" she whispered, the sound carrying on the damp air like a poisoned dart. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Henderson's face, a moment before alight with righteous fury, collapsed into slack-jawed shock and disgust. His sons stared, their crude certainty dissolving into confusion. Alara had not pleaded or wept. She had seized the narrative, ripped it from their hands, and recast herself not as a victim to be rescued, but as a willing sinner, a fallen woman choosing her own damnation. In their eyes, she had just rendered herself worthless, unclean, and irrevocably bound to the outcast they despised. She had made herself untouchable to them. Henderson sputtered, his piety failing him. He looked from her defiant face to Silas's stony profile and saw a unified front he could not break. There was no victory here for him, only the foul taste of her debasement. Without another word, he turned, mounted his horse, and rode away, his sons trailing behind him like chastened dogs. The immediate danger was gone, but the echo of her sacrifice remained, hanging in the heavy air between them. Alara finally allowed herself to look at Silas. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a new depth, a flicker of something that looked like pained understanding. He knew what she had done. He knew the price of those words, the piece of her soul she had just burned away to protect their sanctuary. He turned and walked back toward the barn, but stopped at the door. "The roof on the west shed needs mending," he said, his voice rough but even. Before the next rain, it was not an absolution, nor was it a condemnation. It was a statement of fact, a look toward the future, a quiet acknowledgement that their life here, this strange and silent partnership, would continue. As she watched him go, Alara felt not shame, but a profound and weary strength. She had faced the world's judgment and had not broken. The wind picked up, but for the first time it did not feel like a blade. It felt like a clean, scouring breath, clearing the way for whatever came next.